Hello, listeners. Welcome to my very first podcast episode for Activism with Ambition. Today, I'm really excited to be joined by my first ever guest and friend, Elizabeth Braver. She also goes by Lizzie. She is currently a sustainability and behavior change fellow at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. She works on understanding how people translate climate change knowledge into real world action. She studied social ecology and global sustainability at UC Irvine and has spent years researching the knowing doing gap in climate behavior, which is about why people who care about the environment don't always act on it. Along the way, she's earned recognition for her work, including awards for advanced field study and exceptional achievement in undergraduate research. Lizzie is also someone who's deeply thoughtful about how community and sustainability intersect. So I'm really excited to hear more about her work and perspective today. Hi, Lizzie.
Hi, thank you so much for having me and for that wonderful introduction. I'm excited to join your podcast.
Of course. Okay, like to start, could you briefly describe your role as a sustainability and behavior change fellow and some of the projects you've worked on?
Yeah, so this is a fellowship through an AmeriCorps program called the Sustainability Service Corps, and it connects fellows with different host sites to gauge an 11th month fellowship. So my fellowship is at the Monterey Bay Aquarium, and a lot of the work that I do is around meeting the aquarium's public sustainability goals for net zero waste and emissions by 2035. And recently, a lot of my work has focused on staff engagement in our sustainability efforts and also our waste management projects.
Amazing. How long have you been at the Monterey Bay Aquarium for?
I started in October, so I don't know how many months that is.
Amazing.
Halfway through my film.
To ask, what does behavior change mean in the context of environmental sustainability?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, in my perspective, I feel like sustainability and kind of a lot of the climate change issues depends on humans because we've kind of caused a lot of the issues that we see, and we need behavior change from people to help us address these challenges. And so, I think it's kind of help finding ways to make it easy for people to engage in pro-environmental behaviors and climate action and making it accessible and easy and understandable and kind of in that space. So yeah.
Interesting. To add, like, what kind of strategies have you found like most effective in encouraging people to adopt more sustainable behaviors?
I think it can really depend on kind of the issues you're trying to address. Recently, a lot of work that I've been doing is around like social influence and kind of understanding how people really value and kind of are influenced by the perspectives and norms of other people and kind of trying to use that subtly to nudge them towards the right direction into more pro-environmental behaviors.
Nice. So like in the strategies that you do, like do you kind of go at it in a more like emotional way, educational, or like it's like policy, like you kind of have to do it. And then from those ways, like which one do you think motivates people the most?
That's a great question. I think in the scope of work that I'm doing, it's mostly around educational and emotional, but it can also really be policy driven too. And a lot of kind of so we some policy work that we're doing is around like the aquarium has really tried to get rid of all of their single-use plastics, and that is influenced by a policy. I think it's SB. I can't remember exactly the title, but we're doing a lot of trying to do behavior change to help us meet those policy restrictions around single-use plastic. So I think it can really depend, and I think they can all be equally motivational. It just depends on kind of what issue you're trying to address.
Okay. From like when you do implement these strategies, like what challenges do you face? Do you face it from like the people you were trying to impact or like, send the message out to, or like the institutions that you're working with to send the message out?
That's a good question. I think a lot of the times when institutions don't have the infrastructure to make these behavior changes like easy and accessible, then that is a really big barrier. But I think also kind of on an individual level, sometimes people, if you're not really explaining why this is important and kind of coming from it from the perspective that is valuable to them and like a priority to them, then that can also be a barrier. Because sometimes, sustainability is not like the biggest priority to them. It's maybe more like financial or economic. And a lot of times sustainability can go really hand in hand with that. And so just kind of highlighting how it can also be kind of addressing those concerns around maybe a different priority that they have and how it also will be helping us move towards sustainability can be really effective.
Okay. Like for also like what makes behavior change like difficult, like at a large scale?
I think convenience, that's a big, I feel like issue is a lot of times people don't want to change their behavior if it's not convenient. And so I think trying to make changing your behaviors as accessible and just meeting people where they are is kind of the biggest way to try to help address those issues around convenience and that barrier to behavior change.
Okay. To move into the more like disability justice side of all of this. So environmental activism like often focuses on large scale policy changes. Like how do you think about like accessibility and inclusion when designing those sustainability initiatives?
Yeah, well, I feel like a lot of in my work in sustainability and a lot of kind of the mentors that I really value are always trying to really emphasize environmental justice and I think that includes accessibility and inclusion and kind of always making that the center of environmentalism because you can't really do effective environmental work if you're not including diversity and inclusion and accessibility. So I think
That's
I
okay.
wait, can you remind me your question or if I answer that fully?
Yeah, of course. So, like, environmental activism often focuses on large scale policy change. How do you think about accessibility and inclusion when designing sustainability initiatives?
Yeah, so I think I'm just saying that I think it's like a core part. Like I think you really can't be doing effective environmental work without considering accessibility and inclusion. Because yeah, they're core pieces and like, having you can't understand everything from your own perspective. And so having and being able to address everything perfectly. So you really need to think about accessibility and inclusion and talk to people that have different perspectives of you than you, so you can be pulling in all those pieces in the work that you're doing.
Is there like anything you've seen like throughout your either educational career or in your time working at Monterey Bay Aquarium that it's been like a you've done implemented a sustainability like practice and you had to take into account about accessibility also?
Yeah, so a recent project that we're working around is really trying to reduce our waste stream of paper towels. That's like one of the biggest waste streams that we have at the aquarium. And so some ways that we're kind of considering doing that is installing hand dryers and hand blowers in our bathrooms. But something what we want to also take into consideration is that that can be really overstimulating to some people. And so trying to see how we can balance kind of trying to reduce waste with paper towels through through hand blowers, but also making an accessible and inclusive experience to our guests. And so looking into kind of hand blowers that are quiet, or I think we're still kind of trying to explore all the options that are available to us in that area.
That's interesting. Do you think there's any ways like environmental programs can like unintentionally exclude disabled people?
Yeah, I think if they just aren't including their voices in the conversation when you're trying to address these problems, I think um, kind of if the majority of people in the conversation are able-bodied and don't have those considerations to be thinking about, then they're not going to be including it at all when they're thinking about it and planning for sustainability challenges. And that's really unfortunate because I think there's um, a lot of value and like improvement to the sustainability work when including all these voices and perspectives.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think some things I've learned in my class is like two things where you can crypt the resistance. Many times there's like movements, like for example, the examples used in the essays or like the chapters that I read was that like there would be like the Black Lives Matters movements or like it's a lot of marches and protests and a lot of the eye is on like able-bodied people like marching across the streets and stuff where the author kind of brought us back to remind us that like disabled people have been part of resistance and movements, but their way of doing it is like much different where they would do it from home and create like an environment where people can come replenish or they're part of doing like Zoom interviews and calls and such like that. But you can crypt the resistance to make your voice heard. And I think one thing like we should push as like people is that whenever there are movements that kind of keeping our lens and eye everywhere instead of just like people on the streets and like able to visibly get on a camera, if that makes sense. um I also, another thing that I learned was how we include disabled people in conversations. Like a lot of the time, like when we include them, like they're like an afterthought after something's been built. They're like, okay, now how can we make this accommodating instead of like doing it from the get-go and kind of redefining that like let's not make it just for the able body, let's make it for everyone and create it like as if it's been a universal experience since the beginning of time. So I think that's like you said, like it's really important that like a lot of these educational programs or sorry, environmental programs like include that from the very beginning instead of an afterthought.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear because I feel like sometimes I feel similarly like with sustainability issues where it's like a lot of the infrastructure is like, just kind of to make operations as effective. And then like retroactively, we're trying to have to address a lot of the sustainability concerns that we're seeing, and it's going to be cost a lot of more money or be a lot more work to now implement these things like retroactively if we couldn't have just like done it from the beginning. And it seems like that is extremely true also for a lot of accessibility concerns. And also kind of going back to like the example that I was saying that we're doing around hand blowers, it's like, from my perspective, like that right now that is kind of the one solution that we're considering, but maybe like the having more disabled voices in the room, like they'll have a lot more ideas and perspectives that we wouldn't have ever been able to consider from our perspective because that's just like, not in our experience of the world. You know, and that's so limiting to the kind of work that we're trying to do. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. I think like slowly but surely, like a lot more voices are being heard, and I think a lot of it has to do with like the education that's being taught in schools. Like for like I don't think it was until this class that I'm taking that I realized that the the disability justice movement happened the same time the civil rights movement happened. It was
Mhm.
it was influenced by the civil rights movement. And it's like if we were taught that at an earlier time, we would have a completely different mindset about how we like converse with disabled people and not see them as like something we should shy away from or be scared to be talk about openly. Um,
Mhm.
now to ask like many like disability justice scholars talk about interdependence, oh my god, interdependence in community care. Do you see examples of interdependence in environmental activism or sustainability work?
Yeah, and just to make sure I understand, like, would you mind like giving me a little bit of a definition of like interdependence?
Yes, I can. Let me search it up really quickly.
Yeah.
So, okay, just to make sure I got it right. So, interdependence is like the state of mutual reliance between individuals, groups, and systems where each depends on the other for support and resources and shared goals. Not to be confused with codependence, which is a little bit more like um, tasking, like it's not as like how do I explain this? Like codependency is more like it's like excessive amounts of like reliance on a partner, whereas interdependence is a lot more like but it goes both ways for just support and resources, and it's with a lot more boundaries.
hmm Yeah, I definitely I would think that the interdependence is involved in a lot of sustainability work, and kind of thinking about it in the work that I'm doing is like a lot of the times that we are really trying to make sure that we are having all the stakeholders like involved. And so like a lot of our different departments, because sometimes the departments aren't like, are doing projects like independently and not communicating, but like if we work together on it, it could be like a lot more effective. And we're kind of trying to do similar work. And we want everyone to have buy-in to the sustainability work so that they can like feel ownership for it. And I think it will be that much more effective. And then also kind of a lot of concern is like we don't want like sustainability work to be siloed, because it's kind of similarly like people are doing similar works and similar work, and like a lot of time the aquarium is working with outside organizations that are trying to do similar projects. Like a lot of the work that we do, it was around plastic pollution and reducing single-use plastics, and there's a lot of organizations that are working on similar projects, and I think sharing resources and ideas and is involved a lot of it, because I think climate work can be kind of really disheartening, and having this community can really make it easier to continue to do the sustainability work and stay motivated. So yeah.
Interesting. To move to another part is so there's a lot of like climate crises, especially now, like with wildfires and extreme weather, and that like affects a lot of disabled communities. For example, like in California, like in 2020, which was mentioned in by Pips and Summerance in the chapters, is that there was a great like smoke, like California wildfire, and it made like the living quality and the air quality like really bad, to the point where I think about 100,000 disabled people had to like relocate. And not only is it like sustainability is very important in the fact that it would preserve our environment and stuff, but like when it's not addressed, the climate change can affect more than just the environment. It affects the care networks that these disabled people have built over time, like the different knowledge and resources that and support systems that like it's not like they can relocate and like create that like easily. Like it takes time to like do the trial and error. So yeah, so it affects like disabled communities. And how do you think institutions like the Monterey Bay Aquarium think about protecting like the vulnerable communities during environmental crisis?
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, I don't think enough institutions think about vulnerable communities when doing environmental work. But I think Monterey Bay Aquarium at least is doing a lot of great work, specifically, as I mentioned, around like plastic pollution. And I think kind of really focusing on the concern around microplastics in our oceans and waterways. And I think that can be really relevant to vulnerable communities, because we're finding, and the aquarium is involved in a lot of research around like the health impacts related to plastics and microplastics in our waterways. And I think that can be even more detrimental to vulnerable communities, like people with immune compromised systems. And so I think we're doing a lot of work to try to remove microplastics and just plastic production out of um, the in the community, and kind of I think at least trying to see like, sorry, I'm getting my words mixed up. But like I think maybe I can't say that Monterey maybe is the most vulnerable community, but I think, I mean, the ocean is connected to so many different communities, and it's all something that we all share. And it can easily get like into so many different waterways and be affecting so many different vulnerable communities. So I think the work that we're trying to do is trying to address a lot of vulnerable communities from the impacts of microplastics. And at least like eternally at the aquarium, we're trying to really reduce plastics and like reuse, like single use, but also just any type of plastic. So we do a lot of research around how like, chemicals from plastics can get into your food when you're like heating up food. So we've tried to phase out a lot of plastics in like, our dining areas, and using reusable of other materials like stainless steel and ceramic and stuff like that. So kind of thinking of our Monterey Bay Aquarium community, of our staff and employees, and how we can help them avoid the health impacts of plastics. So.
Yes, it's actually such a good point, and like something like I feel like yeah, it's like very much overlooked. Like yeah, like there's so many different health impacts with like the amount of plastics we have in our water and stuff. So it's definitely like so impactful to the disabled community. In your experience, what role do local communities play in sustainability work compared to large institutions or governments?
I mean, I would say that I think they are some of the most important pieces of environmental work, being on the front lines and really getting to talk to communities that are most likely being the firsthand experiencing of these issues and seeing how you can support them and help them, you know, withstand those climate change impacts. And then also, building momentum and like climate action from the ground, I think is so important. So I would say that kind of local activist groups are probably the most important pieces of climate action as a whole. So.
Have you seen like community networks fill gaps that institutions haven't?
Yeah, I would say one kind of really cool local and small scale organization that I got to do meet with recently and do a tour of is they have created a facility with these tools that were designed by like a Dutch grad student, and he's made his designs free for everyone, and it's like a way to recycle plastic. And they've kind of worked with a lot of people in their communities, a lot of students, in getting students, like empowering them to be able to do their own work and, use the recycled plastics to create new things and raise money for different objectives. And they, I think, have gotten to like in their very small scale, and so they get to kind of work more directly with communities in a way that like maybe a bigger organization wouldn't be able to, and kind of support smaller scale activist projects. So yeah.
Cool. I think like while you were speaking about that, like it reminded me of that one event where like I think that you took me to back when we were in college. Do you remember what it was at the Rivian Theater where it was in
Oh
partnership
yeah.
with I think Laguna
It was
Community College, right?
an Earth Day, I think like it was an Earth Day event where there was different speakers. And that was, yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah, like I think that was like a really good blend of like not like either or like but it was like community like work or community networks and like institutions where they were institutions help them display the community work that they've done, but
Mhm.
working on those sustainable like clothing. I remember like seeing cool shoes and soles and stuff like that, but yeah, I think that's like a really good like partnership that I remember about. If you could design or redesign sustainability activism to be more inclusive and community centered, what changes would you make?
Ooh, that's a heavy question.
Yes, it is.
Um, I mean, I think it maybe feels a little bit basic, but it's just, I think it's always like the first thing is just including people, like of all voices and perspectives, and giving them a platform and actually like taking what they're saying and implementing it and not, being performative and like people can say like you have different voices, but it's like, are you actually listening to them, are you actually taking what they're saying and implementing it? So I think there's always room for improvement there, and just giving a platform for more diverse and inclusive voices. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I definitely like, include them from the beginning. And you say it's basic, but we've like we've been a civilization for how many years and it's still we haven't done that. Like still it's
Yeah.
something we have to fight for and argue for. And I think um well there was a point that I wanted to make, but I can't remember. Uh it's okay. I'll come back to it if it comes back to me. Um, what advice would you give to students who want to work at the intersection of environmental sustainability and social justice?
Hmm. Um, I mean, I think there is such a growing like field of this work, and I think a lot of times environmental sustainability work is really trying to center social justice and environmental justice. So usually it's not kind of hard to find that intersection. Um, but I think really trying to make sure that understanding the work that they're doing and be critical that it's not, like kind of greenwashing, and make sure that they are really being inclusive and accessible, and including diversity. So I think it's always important to be a little critical of that, or just have like a little critical eye and come in and always, I think there's no issue with always trying to push people to be, do better. No one has to be perfect from the beginning. You can always be striving to do better. And I think that's important. Um, and sometimes kind of you joining can maybe be helping them do better. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think like it takes one like you not a unique perspective, but someone who isn't willing to back down and one courageous voice to really make all the changes that we need to see or just push more people to join in on the fight and on the movement. Going back to the idea that I had lost and it came back to me
Yes.
is that like I think us as humans, like especially in like the corporate settings, we create solutions to the problems we also created and then market them as like wow, like we did this for you and stuff. So like it's like that
Yep.
secondhand afterthought thinking where like if you created a ramp for a building, it's like this is we did this for you. We had you in mind, but that's like we're treating every room that we enter as if like first it was meant for the able bodied and then it was meant for the disabled. Like we are all one, we're all one people and it's like we share the same land, the same like freedom and everything. So like it should be just like considered as one for sure. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I guess that those are all the questions I had for you. I had a great conversation. If do you have any final thoughts?
No, I just wanted to say that I really appreciate getting to like hear everything that you've learned from your class, and I feel like I already feel like there's something new I can learn to bring to my work, and want to be kind of continue to push myself to think more about from an accessibility and inclusivity lens and sustainability work, because I know that there's definitely a lot more work to be done in that, and I think we've had this conversation before where it's like sometimes I think maybe accessibility and inclusivity from the disabled community is kind of the last thing that's considered when trying to do DEI work and sustainability or anything. And so that's definitely something I want to continue to improve on in my sustainability work. So I appreciate that.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your experience and all your advice. And I think, yeah, it's a lot for everyone to reflect on. So I'm really excited to
Yeah.
see what happens and hopefully it goes into the world with on such a positive note. So thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you.